Jai Hind, this is Brigadier Hemant Mahajan who welcomes you to another session on national security. The subject that we are going to talk today is the Russia-Ukraine war. Today is the 17th day of Russia-Ukraine war. What has happened up till now? How have the Ukrainians countered the mighty Russian army? And most important, what is the lessons that India as a country can draw from this Russia-Ukraine war? These are the aspects we will talk about. We will focus more on what India should do rather than going for international lessons. I think let us see firstly how the war started. The war started with Russia using weapons such as PGM, precision guided ammunition. PGM missiles they have used, which means they can target fire at a target very accurately. And the Russians in the initial stages attacked the military bases, the air force bases and the naval bases of Ukrainian army. However, the analysis is this was not very effective because while the buildings were destroyed, but the people inside were either underground in underground bunkers or had moved to different places. A PGM was generally a cruise missile with a range of about 400 to 500 kilometers. It is quite accurate. The circular error of probability is very less, but it did not have the desired effect. Thereafter, it massed its forces on the border, expecting Ukrainians to get scared, but it did not happen. On 24th of February, they moved inside. The Russians thought that with the thousands of armored vehicles crossing into Ukraine on multiple axes, the Ukrainians will get scared. They came inside from 5 different directions, but the tank don't seem to have had any effect on the Ukrainian people. While on the other hand, the Ukrainians have countered the tank column with anti-tank guided missiles such as JAVELINE, and they have a large number of them, which they are using to target the long convoys of tanks, the armored personnel carriers, etc., spread over 300-400 kilometers inside Ukraine, and the tank advance seems to have been stalled. Russia approximately used 1.5 lakh to 2 lakh troops for this action. That means they would have used something like 4 to 5 divisions. They have gone on multiple axes. The Ukrainians had not, really speaking, held a defensive line. The Ukrainian army was present only in important towns. So therefore, the Ukrainian army, instead of defending at the borders as the Indian army does, is basically guarding certain important cities, most important being Kyiv, which is the capital of Russia. The next set of weapons which the Russians used were the Air Force. Air Force was not used in the initial campaign because it can cause collateral damage, but now it has been used. However, despite having a very strong Air Force, it appears that the Ukrainian Air Force is still carrying out raids once in a while. Ukrainians' drones seem to be effective, and Ukrainians' anti-aircraft defense system doesn't seem to have been completely been destroyed. So the freedom from skies, while it is there in a big way, but as far as smaller elements like drones are concerned, they have not been neutralized by the Russian army. The next set of weapons which the Russians have used in addition to tanks, in addition to the APs, is their artillery. Initially, they did not want to use artillery or Tofkhana because it's an area weapon and it can cause damage to civilians. But now that the war is in the 17th day and the Russian army is not able to progress as was desired, so therefore they have started using artillery. However, the Russian army is still not willing to enter the cities because they are only carrying out a siege surrounding the city and expecting them to surrender. Of course, they have turned off electricity, water, etc. But building to building fighting, street to street fighting, fighting the Ukrainian army which is guarding the city of Kiev by deploying themselves in various buildings has not been done. Okay. The next set of weapons which now let us instead of talking about other set of weapons which the Russians have used, let us now talk about the weapons which the Ukrainian army has used. Ukrainian army has basically they couldn't have used their air force much. However, they seem to have utilized their drones which they have acquired from Turkey reasonably well, and have carried out few ambushes on the Russian armor column. However, the most important strength of the Ukrainian army was the spirit of its soldiers and the spirit shown by its population, and a very strong leadership provided by the by Shri Zelenskyy. That spirit seems to have stalled the Russian army up till now. What are the weapons that they are using? The weapons that they have used effectively are anti-tank weapons which have been used against the tanks, or anti-aircraft weapons, especially shoulder-fired missiles, which seem to have been reasonably been effective. Another weapon which is being used very effectively by the Ukrainian army is basically people's resistance. People are providing them with information. People are providing them with intelligence. People are, let us say, stopping, unarmed people are basically stopping the Russian convoys in cities where there is no fighting going on. The Russian armed forces seem to be confronted by the Ukrainians. The Russians expected that Russian-speaking population will come in their support. It doesn't seem to have happened. The Russian intelligence of resolve of Ukrainian people seems to have not been up to the mark. So Russians have really calculated very badly as far as these things are concerned. Now, when the war enters the third almost the end of third week, how will Russians continue to fire? Do they have adequate missiles with them? Will they use costly weapon systems like the short-range ballistic missiles would have been finished? Now, will they use the next series, that is the intercontinental ballistic missiles? If they use it, it will be very costly. The Russian tank tactics have proved to be very inadequate. It would appear that Russians did not carry out isolation and investment of the cities properly. The Russians only are presently relying on the siege warfare, that is covering that is surrounding the city from all sides and expecting it to surrender. The NATO has been giving lot of arms aid to Ukraine, especially in terms of anti-tank guided missiles and anti-aircraft missiles. So what are the lessons as far as India is concerned? The most important lesson for India is we should learn from the spirit of the Ukrainian people. They have, the complete nation is united when they are facing a crisis. We also need to unite when fighting our enemies like China and Pakistan, and of course internal enemies such as the Naxals or the Maoists or the terrorists or the insurgents in some part of the country. We also need to understand that the technology, the anti-tank technology and the anti-aircraft technology is proving to be quite successful against Russia. We should also invest more into modern technologies such as drones, modern technologies such as best anti-tank missiles that the world can produce, modern technologies such as anti-aircraft, etc., being able to use short-range ballistic missiles, especially to silence important targets, etc. So as far as the weapons is concerned, we need to learn from these weapons. But I think the most important lesson for India is that it must be Atmanirbhar as far as weapon production is concerned. All major systems must be produced in the country, because when the difficult time comes, this weapon system supply can be stopped. Even as on now, we are slightly worried that we may not get adequate spares for our Russian equipment. We don't need to worry. We are more than capable of diversifying our sources. We are capable of producing these spare parts which are vital for maintaining our tank fleet, maintaining our aircraft fleet, etc. with by using by making our private sector work for it. Because if we have to keep our air force and tank fleet on ground, then we require a very good spares management. So Atmanirbhar Bharat is very important. The spirit of the Ukrainian people is very important. How they are fighting, that is very important. And one of the most important lessons that one learns from here is that NATO did not participate in this war. The European countries did not participate in this war because they don't want to lose their soldiers. Similarly, America ran away from the Afghan war and did not participate in this war because they did not want to lose the soldiers. Now, similarly, it appears that Russian soldiers are also not very willing to fight the war. There are reports that Russian parents are worried that Putin has sent its children into war. Russian army consists of nearly 50 to 60% of the conscription army, meaning people, youth are made to compulsorily join the Russian army, serve there for 3 years. Out of these 3 years, 1 year is training and 2 years they serve. So these people are not interested in fighting. They are saying that why don't you use your full-time army for fighting? So therefore, there is a fair amount of resistance from the Russian side. Not only that, because of the economic strangulation or economic sanctions which which America and Europe have applied on Russia, even the Russian rich people who have plenty of property in Europe and America and have plenty of business interests there seem to have been affected, and they are also against prolonging this war. So presently it appears that the Russian army has been caught in a bind. Possibly they are not willing to get inside the city. So how will they win the war? We will come to know in the next few days. However, Putin is a very strong person, and therefore he will utilize all might to subdue Ukraine. There should be no doubt on this issue. But the fact remains that this war, presently the Ukrainians have fought very well, and they have managed to prolong this war for such a long time. While India can learn important lessons from here, another important lesson is that we need to build as many alliances as possible, so that when the time comes, at least few of our friends will give us help, at least in terms of arms, ammunition, modern weapons, etc. So time is come now to improve our to launch a diplomatic offensive and to win over as many nations as possible, and diversifying our source of getting weapons, etc. I will stop here. If you have liked this video, please share it with as many people as possible, and thank you very much. Jai Hind.